Atlanta is a city with black millionaires at every street corner, but only a handful of these families have built dynasties powerful enough to shape the Black Mecca from the inside out. These are empires that control industries, influence culture, and move money at a scale most people never see. Sit tight as we begin this crazy countdown of the 10 richest business dynasties from Atlanta. And the dynasty at number 1? Their fingerprints are on Atlanta's landscape in ways most people never even notice. Number 10. The Ludacris family, Christopher Bridges. Atlanta hip-hop has produced plenty of millionaires, but Ludacris might be its smoothest operator. He started out as Chris Lova, a radio DJ with a knack for wordplay, before dropping albums that went multi-platinum in the early 2000s. Songs like Stand Up and Move didn't just dominate clubs, they turned him into a household name. But the thing that made him stand out was his vision. When most rappers were still figuring out endorsement deals, Ludacris was diversifying his portfolio, tapping into multiple billion-dollar markets. Hollywood came knocking, and his role as Ted J. Parker in Fast and Furious snowballed into one of the most lucrative film franchises in history. All of a sudden, he wasn't just raking in concert money, he was collecting blockbuster paychecks as well. And his net worth today? Well, the estimates land between $30–50 million, and that's not counting the cultural capital he's stacked. And like any true ATL boss, he kept the money local. Restaurants, tech startups, real estate. Ludacris turned his music fame into seed money for investments that still feed back into Atlanta. Then there's the Ludacris Foundation, which has poured millions into youth programs, scholarships, and arts education. For someone who built his career on punchlines, the legacy work is no joke. Of course, we can't ignore the irony that Ludacris is now better known to Gen Z for his Fast and Furious stunts than for the music that initially built his fortune. But that's kind of the point, actually. He's a proof that Atlanta wealth is more than about one hustle. It's about stacking hustle on hustle until you've built an empire. And as impressive as Ludacris's rise to a millionaire is, it's still nothing compared to the next name on our list. A man born enslaved who clawed his way into becoming one of Atlanta's first true black millionaires. Now that's a plot twist. Number 9. The Herndon Dynasty and Atlanta Life Insurance. Now, let's rewind to the past a little and spice up our countdown with a touch of history. Alonzo Herndon's story isn't just a rags to riches tale. It's a born enslaved, walked 30 miles barefoot to freedom, then somehow became Atlanta's first black millionaire kind of tale. And that's not exaggeration. Herndon was born in 1858 into slavery in Social Circle, Georgia, and by the time of his death in 1927, he had turned himself into the financial anchor of black Atlanta. It started in a barber's chair. Herndon opened up barbershops around Atlanta, catering to the city's elite white clientele. The money rolled in, but instead of stopping there, he funneled his earnings into real estate and, more importantly, insurance. At the time, mainstream banks and insurers flat-out denied black families access. So in 1905, Herndon founded the Atlanta Mutual Insurance Association, which later became Atlanta Life Insurance Company. But if you think it was all business for him, well, it was more than that. It was survival. Herndon's policies allowed black families to borrow, save, and pass wealth to their children. A radical idea in Jim Crow, Georgia. By pooling those premiums, Atlanta Life became a capital engine. Mortgages, business loans, and even funeral costs were suddenly accessible to a community that had been systematically locked out. The Herndon home, his 15-room Beaux-Arts mansion on Diamond Hill, became both a family estate and a statement piece. A monument that shouted, "Black wealth exists," during an era designed to erase it. Today, it's a National Historic Landmark, preserved as a museum. Was he flashy? Not exactly. But Herndon left something bigger than yachts or skyscrapers. He built one of the first institutions that proved black wealth could be structured, generational, and resilient. Every time Atlanta gets called the Black Mecca, that root system traces back to him. And while Herndon laid the financial foundation, the next entry on our list has taken things up a notch by cashing million-dollar royalty checks from Hollywood while still keeping her Atlanta empire firmly intact. Number 8. The Burruss household, Candy Burruss. Most people know Kandi Burruss as the Atlanta housewife with the sharp one-liners. But in all honesty, calling her just a reality star is like calling Chick-fil-A just a sandwich joint. That's because she is a one-woman industry. She's a Grammy-winning songwriter behind mega hits like TLC's No Scrubs and Destiny's Child's Bills, 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 tracks that still rack up plays and royalty checks decades later. That's mailbox money at its finest. But royalties are just the appetizer. With her ex-husband Todd Tucker, Kandi built out a whole restaurant empire with the Old Lady Gang, which turned her family recipes into one of Atlanta's most buzzed-about dining spots. Then she spiced things up with Bedroom Candy, a daring product line that quietly made millions. Add to that Broadway-producing credits, cosmetics, real estate investments, and a long-running reality TV spotlight, and you start to see why estimates place her household fortune at $20–35 million. What makes it even juicier is how hands-on Kandi stays. She's not just slapping her name on a product. She's running payroll, pushing marketing, and making sure her businesses stand on their own legs. And while she plays hard in business, she gives back just as strong, funding scholarships, mentoring young artists, and hiring straight from her community. It's that rare combination. Celebrity shine with entrepreneurial grind. And yet, as impressive as that is, the next entry is even more interesting. A rapper who went completely off script and decided that if the banks weren't going to help his people, he'd just build his own. Number 7. Michael Killer Mike family, Herndon and Greenwood. Every rapper talks about power, but Killer Mike went out and built some. In 2020, alongside civil rights icon Andrew Young and tech entrepreneur Ryan Glover, he launched Greenwood, a digital bank aimed squarely at Black and Latino communities in Atlanta who'd spent decades locked out of mainstream finance. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just a vanity project. Within weeks of its announcement, Greenwood racked up hundreds of thousands of signups, making it one of the fastest-growing fintech launches of its time. Investors piled in, seed rounds ballooned, and suddenly a rapper famous for politically charged lyrics was sitting at the table with serious Wall Street players. But Greenwood isn't just about profits. It's a statement. The name itself nods to Tulsa's Greenwood district, better known as Black Wall Street, destroyed in the 1921 massacre. Killer Mike positioned the bank as a digital resurrection of that legacy. His pitch? If the old system wouldn't serve his community, maybe technology could. Of course, the road hasn't been smooth. Greenwood's had to prove it can scale like a real bank and not just a headline-friendly startup. Critics questioned whether a rapper-led fintech could seriously challenge industry giants. But ask yourself this, who else in Atlanta could take a stage name like Killer Mike and turn it into the brand ambassador for generational wealth building? You might think it's too bold or even messy, but it's completely on brand for a man who spent his career preaching economic empowerment through music, activism, and now banking. And while Killer Mike was busy rewriting the rules of finance, the next mogul on our list was busy keeping the culture moving, literally with bass, beats, and enough platinum records to put Atlanta on the global map. Number 6. Antoine Big Boi Patton, Outkast. If Atlanta had a soundtrack in the 2000s, there is a high chance that it was written by Outkast. Antoine Big Boi Patton, one half of the legendary duo, has one of those careers that never really stopped paying. Outkast sold over 25 million records, snagged 6 Grammys, and dropped Speakerboxxx and The Love Below, a double album so successful that it went diamond. Making money from music is one thing, but this is the still cashing checks 20 years later kind of money. But Big Boi didn't just sit back and let the royalties flow. He doubled down on Atlanta. Restaurants? Check. Studios? Check. Even a dog kennel and breeding ranch called Pitfall Kennels, because why not add champion-bred bulldogs to your portfolio? It's Atlanta. Eccentricity counts as currency. The math behind his wealth is also quite interesting. There are royalties from Outkast's catalog, which still gets heavy sync placements in movies, ads, and shows. Then there's touring revenue as well as the solo projects that he does. And on top of all that, there's reinvesting into local businesses. All this accounts for an estimated net worth of somewhere between $20–30 million, depending on how you count the catalog. The real legacy, however, is still cultural instead of financial. Big Boi funds mentorship programs for young Atlanta artists, pushes music education, and consistently puts his time back into the community. He's not just showing up for ribbon cuttings, he's creating actual pipelines for future talent. And here's another kicker. While some rappers moved to LA or New York once the money came in, Big Boi never left Atlanta. He's a local investor in the truest sense, keeping both his fortune and his influence rooted in the same city that raised him. So Outkast's impact wasn't just global, it was hyperlocal. They gave Atlanta its cultural megaphone, and Big Boi turned that cultural capital into businesses, jobs, and opportunity. And speaking of reinvention, let's look at how our next mogul took cable TV millions and flipped them into a five-star resort empire. Number 5. Johnson Household, Sheila Johnson. Sheila Johnson's story is a clear proof that sometimes the sequel outshines the original. Most people know her as co-founder of BET, or Black Entertainment Television, which she launched with her then-husband Robert Johnson in 1980. The network exploded into a cultural juggernaut and was eventually sold to Viacom in 2001 for $3 billion. That deal instantly minted the Johnsons as America's first black billionaires. But here's where Sheila rewrote the script. After getting a divorce, she didn't just rest on the BET fortune. Instead, she pivoted into luxury hospitality, which was not exactly a lane packed with black women at the top. She founded Salamander Hotels and Resorts, which today runs high-end properties in Virginia, Florida, Washington, D.C., and beyond. We're talking golf courses, spas, and five-star dining experiences that attract a mix of celebrities, executives, and old-money vacationers. Her strategy was sharp. Take the liquidity from the BET sale and park it in tangible assets like hotels and resorts. Media brands can fade, but luxury resorts generate steady cash flow, equity appreciation, and priceless brand prestige. Industry insiders peg her personal net worth in the high hundreds of millions, with Forbes occasionally floating the billionaire mark depending on valuation cycles. Philanthropy is another thing woven into the empire. Sheila Johnson chairs arts boards, pushes for women's advancement in leadership, and funds education and cultural institutions. She even broke into sports ownership, once holding stakes in the Washington Wizards, Capitals, and Mystics, making her the first black woman with ownership across 3 major pro sports teams. The real hook? Johnson transformed a cultural brand into a wealth dynasty that will outlive cable, reality TV, or music catalogs. She took Black entertainment and rebranded it as Black Excellence, stamped across luxury resorts that compete with the Four Seasons and Ritz-Carlton. And if you thought flipping TV money into hotels was impressive, wait until you see how our next billionaire built his fortune from scratch, scripted and starred in his own empire, and just might be Atlanta's most famous mogul alive. Number 4. Awotona Household, Tope Awotona. If the rest of Atlanta's moneymakers built fortunes on bricks, records, or restaurants, Tope Awotona built his business dynasty on calendars and a single insight that people hate scheduling. Born in Lagos and raised between Nigeria and the US, Awotona parlayed grit, early startup failures, and a blisteringly simple product idea into Calendly, the scheduling tool millions now use to stop the email ping-pong. Fast fact, after a major funding round in 2021 valuing Calendly at roughly $3 billion, founder wealth estimates moved him into the billionaire neighborhood, with Forbes snapshotting around $1.4 billion between 2024 and 2025. And here's the engine. Calendly sells recurring subscriptions to companies big and small, plugs into the apps like Google, Outlook, or Slack. Basically the stuff every office worker uses, and locks in enterprise contracts with predictable revenue. Now multiply that annual recurring revenue across high margins and you've got valuation multiples that make founder equity skyrocket. The company's product market fit is textbook. Tens of millions of users, freemium conversion, and big-ticket enterprise deals that make the unit economics sing. But what makes Tope's story feel uniquely Atlanta is where he built it. This isn't move to Silicon Valley or die Silicon Valley lore. It's Lagos Marietta Buckhead, a founder who kept HQ and high-paying jobs in Georgia. He's invested locally, funds education initiatives, and speaks publicly about immigrant entrepreneurship, a living example that Atlanta can incubate global SaaS powerhouses. Awotona fixed the one thing we all hate, and then he sold it to the world. But the next name on this list didn't just sell out arenas. He turned the stage into a whole business ecosystem. Number 3. The Usher Business Dynasty, Usher Raymond. Ever dreamt of living like an R&B legend with a golden voice and a bank account to match? Dive into the world of Usher, who's unarguably one of the best-selling artists ever with tens of millions of records. But instead of just enjoying all that fame, Usher translated it into a sophisticated stack of income engines: album sales, massive touring, publishing and catalog royalties, lucrative Vegas residencies, brand deals, and selective equity bets. Conservative public estimates place his net worth around $150 to $200 million, but that number hides a much richer truth. Usher's real currency is influence. He leverages it into ownership. Career arc in 2 beats. First, breakout artist. LaFace Records smash albums like Confessions and arena tours that filled stadiums. Second, strategic owner-operator. Catalog rights, residencies that pay like annuities, and behind-the-scenes music business moves. Vegas residencies are especially telling. Guaranteed, high-margin cash flow that turns performance into predictable revenue, the anti-tour burnout. Add publishing, which is something that pays for decades, and your passive income streams look very different from a hit single's one-time payday. Usher's Atlanta link matters. He's a product of the ATL R&B ecosystem, and he puts energy back into it through mentorship, talent development deals, and investments in emerging artists and businesses. Where some stars cash checks and fly out, Usher invests in pipelines, studios, production companies, and partnerships that keep creative jobs local. That's how cultural capital begets economic capital. Up next, the man who turned small theater plays into a full-fledged movie town and owns most of the stage. Number 2. Perry Household, Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry turned hustle into infrastructure. What started as one-man stage plays evolved into a business school in action. Own your content, own your studio, and never lease your future. Perry's empire, Tyler Perry Studios, sits on roughly 330 acres of the former Fort McPherson base in Atlanta, with multiple sound stages, backlots, and permanent standing sets so realistic producers can shoot a city without leaving the lot. Forbes and industry profiles peg his net worth in the $1.4 billion range, but the real asset is the double play: IP ownership and real estate production capacity. Why that's brilliant? Owning the content library means long-term licensing, streaming paydays, and control. Owning the studio means production revenue, local supplier contracts, and a physical magnet that pulls other projects and jobs to Atlanta. The studio became a hub for film and television. Marvel sequels, big streaming shows, even major feature films use those stages, and each shoot multiplies local economic impact: hotels, catering, crew, carpenters, wardrobe. Perry's playbook created thousands of jobs and seeded a production ecosystem that rivals the old Hollywood model. There's also the social angle. Perry actively frames his success as community building, public speeches about creating Black millionaires and visible philanthropy. At the same time, running an empire this big invites scrutiny. Personnel disputes, legal pushes, and the complexity of scaling a private media house in a streaming age are real and make the story textured, not cartoonish. And now, at the very top of our list, meet the billionaire who turns software deals into institutional philanthropy, and does so with a finesse that makes him a global icon. Number 1. Smith Household, Robert F. Smith. When we say crown jewel, we mean it literally: the richest concentration of private Black wealth that also reaches deep into Atlanta's civic life. Robert F. Smith, founder and chairman of Vista Equity Partners, built a machine that buys, scales, and sells enterprise software companies. That private equity engine, improving operations, increasing recurring revenue, and exiting at higher multiples, is the wealth factory. Forbes snapshots in recent years put Smith's net worth in the multi-billion range, commonly reporting around $10 billion in 2024-25 ranges. On top of that, Vista's decades of deals have created a compounding effect that few founders achieve. But here's the thing that makes Smith different from a classic rich guy with a jet. He's turned private wealth into public leverage. His 2019 pledge to pay off the graduating class's student debt at Morehouse College was not a PR stunt. It was a thesis. Use capital to change access. That gesture, a single, seismic move, reframed what billionaire philanthropy can do at the city level. Beyond that, his donations to museums, research institutions, and educational initiatives funnel money, jobs, and influence into Atlanta's civic arteries. Financial mechanics matter as well. Vista's model creates founder carry and equity value that compound aggressively, and Smith's large founder stakes, plus carried interest, give him recurring upside across many portfolio exits. But the narrative complexity is what makes him perfect for number one. He's a celebrated donor who reshapes institutions, and at the same time, his business is emblematic of broader debates about private equity power, wealth concentration, and accountability. Robert rewrote an entire generation's balance sheet, and that's why in Atlanta's Black Mecca, he undoubtedly sits at the very top. And so, these were the 10 richest black business dynasties in Atlanta. Which one of these impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this exclusive tour through Canada's richest families, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more interesting content.